This is the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast with Nick Caddles.
I just wanted to give one example or two examples of Mike Vrabel. And I'm worried, like, I'm not going to be like this guy, Jared Stillman, who Felger Mass played, all the time about his audio. Like, let's just say I brought his name up to a couple people in that area, and they were just like, it's not like he's like, he's more of a talk radio host than, actually like a reporter, like doing homework. Yeah. But I do worry about Vrabel. I have a worry about Vrabel's ego in that he thinks he can do a lot or make up for a lot of things. Like, I can hire this guy and I'll bring him along. And like, I don't want Mike Vrabel like spread thin. I want him to hire a great staff. Hopefully he learned some lessons and he reflected on that. And that's what he does. Whereas he's like, I'm going to put together the best staff, because what I want is Mike Vrabel thinking up shit on the sidelines and different pressures and different, hey, we need to do this, or we need to do this on special teams. And, and if somebody needs help, he can help them a little bit, give them a little extra edge, like during the game planning. Like, that's why I want Mike Vrabel. I don't want Mike Vrabel to hire all these guys who aren't ready for what they're doing. And now he's spread too thin and we don't get that. Two examples of that scare me. Craig Aukerman, who was the special teams coach for Vrabel for a while, was a disaster, to the point that he got fired halfway through. At one point, he got the punter's leg broken. They had 2 punts blocked in a game. Vrabel finally had to fire him. Everybody knows I care about the offensive line. Keith Carter, offensive line coach, was a disaster. And then they just promoted, once they finally fired him, they just promoted this guy, Jeff Hoteling, who basically had zero experience. This was his experience, okay? He was Vrabel's last offensive line coach. He was a college coach at Wagner for 4 years, for a while, including head coach. He went to Hudson Valley. But that was before. Hudson Valley head coach, 2010. He coached at Colgate in 2020 and then joined the Texans in 2021. And then he was the offensive line coach in 2023. Like, that stuff can't go on. Like, he's got to go get people at offensive coordinator, offensive line. I saw something on Twitter the other day where somebody that I follow about coaching says a play caller is only as good as the offensive line coach. And I firmly believe that. I think we've seen that in practice the past couple years up here. Hopefully people understand that now and realize why I railed against certain things. But Vrabel cannot staff offensive coordinator or offensive line coach like he did at the end of in Tennessee, or else I'm just afraid. I'm afraid for Drake May's future.
I'm going to calm you down a little bit. I'm going to try to settle you down. Okay. Because I feel a little wet blanket Bedard coming on right now.
Help me, baby.
A couple things I would say. Number one, there was a lot of change in Tennessee. And I don't know how many coaches could go out and find, 3 or 4 sets of offensive staff in a matter of 6 years. I mean, he was there with LaFleur. LaFleur was gone after year 1 to be the Green Bay head coach. So you have a major change. Then you go to Arthur Smith. Smith flees. So now you've got to find your third offensive coordinator in like 5 years, which I don't think is the most easy thing to do. And you're turning over a lot of staff because Arthur Smith and LaFleur inevitably are taking some guys from your staff. So you're trying to kind of do that turnover thing constantly, which is pretty difficult to stay ahead of. I think it's made even more difficult. And I'm not telling you he's going to be great at filling the offensive staff. He might be the shits. But I would say that, the other part, like we learned last year, it's not easy to find an offensive coordinator when you don't have a lot to sell. And unfortunately for Tennessee, the quarterback situation was a disaster, as I mentioned. They traded A.J. Brown. Doesn't make it easier for you to find somebody. You had your 2 best offensive linemen leave the team. So I don't know how much Vrabel had to sell to a prospective offensive coordinator. Now, maybe he didn't even want to think about it. Like you said, maybe he just said, Tim, Todd Downing's my guy because he's been with me. We're just going to promote him. Tim Kelly's we're just going to – that could 100% be the thing. Or it could be that, Vrabel looked at it and he couldn't get anybody that was exciting because they didn't have anything exciting to work with, which is how you landed on Alex Van Pelt last offseason. So I do think there are some extenuating circumstances which could have impacted Vrabel's handling of the offensive staff. But with that said, again, we'll see. Maybe not. Maybe it had nothing to do with the extenuating circumstances. Maybe he was stubborn. Maybe he was tunnel visioned. And maybe he just said, I'm sticking with my guys. And if that's the case, then it'll play out. I think it'll be McDaniels if you're wondering.